Hello everyone, my name is Steven and welcome to Storytime. Today we're going to be reading some pro-revenge stories, hearing how people have gotten some of the sweetest and most effective forms of revenge on people that had it coming. And let me just say, if you're not already subscribed to Storytime, please consider doing so. But with that being said, let's sit back, relax, and listen to some captivating Reddit stories. Fire me? You're losing all your jobs. After uni, late 2018, I fell on rough times and was forced to move back to my hometown. I tried to transfer my job to a branch in my area but failed, thus I needed to get a new job. I settled for a 20-hour-a-week job at a Bookies, with a second bartending job in the evenings. The Bookies is the target for my revenge, which was entirely accidental. Involved are the following: Janelle, my manager's manager, Shay, my manager, Jorge and Gordon, my co-workers, and Kara, a co-worker at another store, who is relevant later. I ended up working behind the counter as a customer service manager, basically a step up from a cashier. It's fancy when seen on a CV, but there's nothing really to it. I took bets, chatted with customers, helped people with machines, and, for the vast majority of my shift, sat around waiting for something to do. I got on well with my coworkers, or so I thought, and had no major issues. It was 20 hours a week, about £1 more than the minimum wage, with a lot of overtime required of me and irregular shift patterns. Though I had no issue with the job, beyond how difficult it was to juggle the schedules of both my jobs. In February of 2019, after working for the company for 6 months, I was invited to a probation hearing. It cannot be emphasized enough that it was a probation hearing in which I would have my performance reviewed and, as informed in training, was entitled to a pay raise at the end of it. I arrived that morning to a disciplinary hearing where, without even a shred of evidence, I was accused of 11 different cash discrepancies dating back to early November of 2018, shortly after I started, which all amounted to just over £271, all but one of which I'd never heard of before. These had apparently been reported and logged by my manager, Shay, and my co-workers, despite no one saying a word to me at all. Not a whisper in the 5 months this had apparently been occurring. I was told that it was unacceptable. A call was made to HR and I was terminated on the spot and forced to hand over my keys and to never set foot in the store again. To my protests, I was told the decision could not be appealed and I would eventually receive written confirmation of my employment's termination in the post. I didn't let myself slump around and feel sorry for myself, so on the way home, I opened up Indeed and applied for a bunch of jobs, and before I arrived home, had an interview set up for the next week at what is my current place of work. Now, I was furious, fuming at having gone to what I thought should have been a normal probation meeting and having effectively been called a thief and been banned for life from a place I'd never go to anyway. But somehow, my parents were angrier and ordered me to let them know when they got into contact with me again. Almost 2 weeks later, I received an email from the company's HR which reiterated the accusations and stated again that I was terminated. My mom sat me down in her kitchen and walked me through a letter response that was 2 parts professional and 3 parts scathing, ripping into them about their unprofessional conduct, their ludicrous claims, their lack of evidence, the holes in their story, because there were quite a few, and finally, the cherry on the cake, the employment laws they'd broken. Now, I didn't want much, just a nice reference. A promise that not a whisper of these accusations would turn up when my new job asked them for a reference, because by then, I'd already been offered the job. I then attached the letter to an email to fire back at their HR department. Then I added Janelle's work email, then her boss's email, and finally, the holding company that owned the brand, because I wanted to make sure this was seen. A bit of background: the Bookies I worked for is a brand that is owned by an international company. Their name, behind the scenes, is slapped on everything and they pretty much dictate everything we did. I'm not sure if holding company is the correct term, but I'll stick to that for now. Anyway, I sent this email with a 48-hour window for a response. I received a reply the next day from the same email that my demands were being met. I smirked victoriously and moved on with my life, happy to wash my hands with the entire ordeal. However, I'd set off a chain reaction that I wouldn't know about until 3 months later. 3 months on, I'd settled into my new job, a call center position with double the hours and well over double the pay. I'd gone through training and was settling into my new position when I see a new set of trainees settling in near my team. Among them was Gordon, one of my co-workers from the bookies. I was stunned. Gordon had been at the bookies for 6 years when I joined. He was well liked, good at his job, and a favorite of the managers. There was no way he'd been fired. Though I didn't really want to talk to him, as I was of the impression that he, Jorge, and my manager had likely set me up, I did want to know what happened. Luckily, on seeing me in the break room one shift, he sought me out and told me everything. Apparently, my email had been read by the higher-ups in the holding company and had caused a lot of scrutiny to fall on the bookies in our town, of which there were 3 in our area that Janelle was responsible for, 2 in my town, and a 3rd in a neighboring one. Someone in HR passed a message down to the area manager, Janelle's boss, claiming they wanted things investigated and they wanted results yesterday, causing him to drop everything and descend on our little town with the panic and aggression of a man whose superiors were watching his every breath. He went to Janelle wanting to know why he hadn't been made aware previously that I was apparently stealing money, why I had been given keys to the shop and shifts on my own when allegations of that nature were attributed to me, and why I hadn't been put under investigation. Turns out, Janelle had in fact put in my employee file that I was under investigation, but had never actually gone through with any of the official procedures for monitoring and investigating me. Shock horror. Thus, she had fired me for the accused crime without looking into it at all, falsely claiming otherwise. Thus, the area manager took the dates and amounts of the cash discrepancies, confirmed that they had been reported on those days, without my knowledge, in Shay's own logbook of the shop's cash, and sent that information onto our security team to investigate. Another little detail is that the CCTV for every shop in the brand is outsourced to a private security company who monitors each shop remotely and has access to all the cameras and video. As was procedure, they looked into the dates mentioned to see if I'd been doing anything untoward. I know I wasn't, and nothing was ever said to me. But they did find something. Turns out, money was going missing from the shop, but surprise, surprise, it wasn't me, but Jorge and Shay. They not only set me up for reasons I will never know, but were also falsifying numbers and cash checks on the system to hide it. One thing Shay was caught doing was deliberately shortchanging customers by taking portions of their winnings without them even knowing it. Bear in mind, a lot of our customers were elderly men and women. Gordon claims that he once opened the shop after I and Shay had closed the night before and noticed a cash difference, but had been told not to say anything to me as I was under investigation and it could compromise it. He did apologize and I let it go. Needless to say, Jorge and Shay were fired. But it doesn't end there. Our team was small. Including me, there were a total of 4 people working at the store. As they hadn't been able to hire anyone to replace me, Jorge and Shay's termination meant Gordon was the only employee at the busiest shop in our area. Even if they'd been able to get other colleagues from the other 2 shops to help out, it wouldn't have been enough to keep the shop open and manage the amount of customers. So they closed the location down until they could get the staff to run it. It was at that point that Gordon handed in his resignation and applied for his job at my work, meaning they had no one. On top of that, Gordon's girlfriend worked in the same shop as Janelle, and she relayed that she was rarely at their store in the other town for the next few weeks before the area manager reported she was fired as well. No reason given to her. I was later issued an apology for everything by the area manager and informed she, Janelle, was no longer with the company in an email sometime later. But somehow, it doesn't end there. With the store I worked at closed, this one being on the high street and where most people preferred to go, the only other location in town was the much smaller location in the suburbs, the one where Kara worked. Alone. She suddenly received an influx of customers into her tiny store space and absolutely no support from other staff or upper management. Thus, for her own mental health, having already been overworked and underpaid, running an entire store by herself, she quit, meaning that location had to be closed down too. All of this at the worst possible time, March, when the Cheltenham Festival was occurring, which is a huge moneymaker for the gambling industry even in a small town like ours. An opportunity the 3 other bookies on the high street reaped the benefits of instead of my old place, as the former customers went to them instead. As it currently stands, just over a year later, both shops remain closed and I'm currently entering a job in cybersecurity, the training for which I paid for with my current job. Thanks for firing me, idiots. You did me a favor. Update. Gordon and I got in touch with our old area manager and we were able to get a bit more information. The security team rifled through about 3 years worth of footage after they found out about Jorge and Shay and have estimated that in that period alone, they both stole nearly 4,000 pounds through various means. The parent company also got involved and searched through years worth of their cash checks and till checks and noted plenty of irregularities. The parent company pursued criminal charges and the 2 were arrested, but as far as our area manager knows, the case is still ongoing. He thinks it's because they are still looking into how much they actually stole, as they've both been there a while, Jorge about 8 years and Shay 10 years. I doubt they'll have security footage of all that time, but I bet they're trying to get a more accurate figure to really nail them. And in comes a new character, Tammy. She's an employee who was hired and fired shortly before I was at the same store. She lasted just past her probation before she was fired. Wait for it. For months worth of cash differences and false till checks she wasn't made aware of prior. However, her situation is far worse than mine. Tammy is in the process of suing the company for wrongful termination, alongside financial and emotional damages, as she was put under a lot of stress whilst in the job by Shay, who apparently left her to fend for herself and would refuse to step in when customers got aggressive, and then had a miscarriage shortly after her employment was terminated. Our area manager doesn't know anything more, as it's escalated and gone way above his head, and I doubt I'll be able to get any more information on it. But I doubt the company's doing too well on that front, and I wish her the best. Gordon and I are considering reaching out to some of the other fired employees, of which he can name a few who were terminated for similar reasons, to get their side of things. But it seems very clear that what Shay and Jorge were doing was going on for a long time, and I was only the latest scapegoat. Janelle, unfortunately, is perfectly fine as far as I'm aware. Her husband and her opened a taxi company several years ago and she seems to have just got more involved with that. I haven't seen her so I wouldn't know, but she was terminated for gross misconduct and for not following procedure, which is kinda what I expected. And Kara, who our area manager actually really dislikes, but is lovely and did not deserve what she went through, is doing okay. I've messaged her and she and her partner recently bought a house. She also got a job as an events manager at a local historical site. She's happier there as she actually has people to talk to at work and isn't alone anymore. Oh man. Thank the Lord OP's mom sat them down and walked them through that letter response, because that led to the chain reaction of a lifetime and probably more. There are so many moving parts on this and so many issues to tackle that I don't even know what to say. I'm just glad OP landed on their feet, and unfortunately some other people got seriously affected by this, so I'm really hoping that there's some justice in the end. Either way, I don't see a very good outcome for Jorge and Shay. He was a public health risk, so I got him promoted to customer. Years back, I worked in the back of house for a chain of fast casual restaurants. Let's call it Emerald Wednesday. I had been there for quite some time and had seen many managers, both good and bad, come and go. They typically lasted just a couple of years. We had been gifted a general manager who was sent to our store as his last chance to salvage his career, and when he failed, we were without a general manager for a couple of months. The assistant managers ran the restaurant and things were okay, but no one was getting promoted within the company. Then the district manager went with an outside hire that was coming in from the other side of the country. This guy was a complete idiot. We'll call him Johnny. He had zero experience as a general manager and wasn't even applying for the position, but the district manager talked him into taking the job. Big mistake. Under Johnny's tutelage, our Emerald Wednesday started to slowly fail, mostly due to his mismanagement. He was belligerent to the staff, making a couple of the girls cry by belittling them in front of everyone else. He was so lazy he'd hide in the office on busy weekends while we struggled without a manager. He refused to do even the basics of his job, like the nightly pole thaw. For those who don't know, many things are kept frozen in the walk-in freezer and are pulled forward to the cooler at night so that they thaw before morning. This was rarely done on Johnny's evening shifts. We would routinely have to force thaw steaks, shrimp, and chicken under running cold water, which is not something that we're supposed to even do. I saw on a few occasions that Johnny was cross-contaminating foods under the running water. A pan of frozen shrimp sitting on top of or even in a pan of frozen steaks. At one point, I didn't see this one, Johnny ran some frozen steaks under hot water to thaw them quickly because they needed to be cooked right then. This was a huge problem, and had I seen it, I'd have wanted to punch the fool in his face. We sometimes ran checks of multiple hours and had frequent guest complaints. One guest even threw his silverware at the host. Johnny was called up front and actually took the guest's side, leaving the host in tears. I believe he even comped the guy's meal. Johnny was a real class act. I made it my mission to do something about him. At the very least, he was going to get someone very ill from his shenanigans. So I sat down with the district manager, who had brought Johnny in, and spoke with him at length in great detail about how bad Johnny was, how terrible the morale was, how he could get people ill, all of it. He asked me point blank what I thought of Johnny, and I told him, Johnny is an idiot. Nothing came of it. Christmas was coming and I knew I was quitting in a couple of months. Johnny insisted on having a Christmas party at a bar a town away, but fraternizing between management and hourly employees was against company policy, so I didn't go. Johnny got quite drunk and drove himself home. I heard from coworkers that Johnny had been pulled over for a DUI. Oops. A week or so later, I wrote a lengthy email detailing everything Johnny has screwed up on. Wrote about the Christmas party and included screenshots of court records I was able to look up on the town's website. I set up a burner email account and messaged everyone I could find in the Emerald Wednesday hierarchy. When I went back to work a couple of days later, we had a shiny new general manager, and no one knew what I had done. I am not proud of this, but he was making lives miserable. The restaurant was failing, and I was certain he was a public health risk. Freak you, Johnny. What a nightmarish manager. I don't properly know the process of hiring a general manager for a Emerald Wednesday, but I feel like it's the kind of position that isn't super prestigious. Couldn't you have promoted somebody inwards to that position? Is an Emerald Wednesday general manager position that high up that you need to hire somebody cross-country? And the vetting wasn't even done right? He wasn't applying for that job? I don't even understand any of the ideologies behind this hire. But thankfully, they got that guy out of there before he got somebody seriously ill. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today, so thank you so much for listening and watching the Storytime channel. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and leave any feedback in the comments below on how I can continue to develop the way I deliver these stories. Thank you all again for listening and watching the Storytime channel.